It's Ricky Rich with Black Primacy with a quick question. Have you downloaded the Black Primacy app yet? If you haven't, don't worry about it. I just wanted to remind you that it is the number one way to find Black owned businesses near you. Whether you're looking for food, fashion, or services, we've got you covered on this app. So download it now and start supporting Black owned businesses in your area today. All right? Link in the description.
This is the Great Dismal Swamp. Hundreds of years ago, this sprawling wetland about the size of Delaware stretched down the east coast. The swamp was brimming with snakes and bears and mosquitoes so thick you couldn't see a few feet in front of you. Yet hidden inside was a refuge to tens of thousands of Black people called Maroons who escaped the bonds of slavery, some living free for generations. Maroons didn't just run away or survive in the swamp. They grew into a state-sized stronghold against chattel slavery that lasted more than 250 years in the middle of the South. I'm Harini Butt. Welcome to the heart of Black American resistance, the Great Dismal Swamp. Great Dismal Swamp Maroons were not just one community, but many communities. We can think of them in three main groups. Each was shaped by where they lived in the swamp and how they resisted slavery. But how did they get to the swamp in the first place? In colonial Virginia, both Black and white laborers endured brutal abuses and ran away regularly. Early Maroons likely had help getting to the swamp from indigenous peoples. Many Algonquin-speaking tribes and others had lived along the swamp's coast for thousands of years and were now being driven off their land. But the first major evidence of Great Dismal Marronage came in 1730. Known as the Chesapeake Rebellion, it was set off by a rumor that King George II granted freedom to baptized enslaved people. When they were denied their freedom, several hundred enslaved people led a revolt that was ultimately suppressed by local authorities. Some 200 enslaved people managed to escape to the swamp. However, entering the swamp was not for the faint of heart, according to an account from the famous fugitive Harriet Jacobs. Quote, "As evening approached, the number of snakes increased so much that we were continually obliged to thrash them with sticks to keep them from crawling over us." Unquote. Harriet fled to the swamp to escape sexual violence from her enslaver and the threat of sale. She later wrote, "But even those large, venomous snakes were less dreadful to my imagination than the white men in that community called civilized." People who persevered many miles into the swamp became interior Maroons. These Maroons forged dozens of new societies sustained by nature. Deep inside the swamp were at least 200 small islands where Maroons built cabins and planted crops. They grew corn, beans, and rice, foraged cattails and berries, and hunted wild hogs and deer. They even tended livestock and bees for honey and wax for candles, which they bartered with one another. Interior Maroon communities raised their children in freedom, which they guarded fiercely. They lived in secrecy and were known to carefully monitor surrounding areas and vet new members. For several generations, these communities thrived through cooperation with each other and with nature. The fact that Maroons were self-sufficient contradicted the false narrative that enslaved people couldn't take care of themselves and, in fact, were content at being enslaved for their own good. So perhaps it's not surprising that the slave-owning society found Maroons' existence terrifying. One fearful Virginia landowner, William Byrd II, tried to breach the swamp. His men barely reached 1.5 miles a day, reportedly getting mired in the bog, unable to penetrate the tall reeds and thorny brush. After 8 days, they ran out of supplies and abandoned their attempt. Byrd warned colonial authorities that if no action was taken, the Great Dismal Swamp Maroons could become a powerful force threatening the surrounding region. Interior Maroons had escaped beyond American society's reach. Other Maroons, however, carved out a free life for themselves right under society's nose. The second and most common group of Great Dismal Maroons were fringe Maroons. These Maroons were people who had fled slavery but lived on the outer edges or fringes of the swamp, often to stay close to family members who remained enslaved. In one case, a mother and her 2 children became Maroons while her husband stayed behind in a labor camp to support them. There are many cases like this, but escape attempts also came with extreme risks. Slave owners would enact severe punishments, such as public lashings, branding, cutting off ears, or forcing people to wear iron bits. Fringe Maroons stayed hidden by developing secret codes to communicate with nearby enslaved people. For example, a shirt hung in just the right way could signal that it was safe to move around. Some enslaved people joined Maroons for just a few weeks or months for a break from the unrelenting labor. Many were also determined to take back reproductive well-being and control over their bodies. For others, especially in the 1800s, the swamp was a pit stop on the Underground Railroad, useful for thousands intent on continuing toward freedoms in the North. As more and more people became fringe Maroons, slave owners were losing control of people they considered property, and their plantations were being regularly raided by the very people they had enslaved. In Norfolk, Virginia, officials declared a state of emergency after Maroons killed several white men, reporting that, quote, one slave owner received a note from these amazing fellows suggesting it would be healthier for him to remain indoors at night. And he did, unquote. But for the most part, fringe Maroons survived through mutual aid with each other and those still enslaved. This was a key tactic also used by a third group, the Canal Maroons. In 1763, the Dismal Swamp Canal Company set out to turn the swamp into a source of profit. The company was founded by 12 wealthy slave owners, including the future president of the United States, George Washington. They proposed draining the swamp in order to grow crops like hemp for the US Navy and turn trees into roofing shingles. To move these products, the shareholders envisioned a canal that cut through the swamp and connected the Chesapeake Bay to the Albemarle Sound. The canal was completed in 1805, built by the hard work of enslaved people, many of whom encountered Maroons or escaped themselves. Enslaved laborers, or so-called shingle getters, often subcontracted their work to Canal Maroons in exchange for goods from the outside world and rest. This meant that an enslaved shingle getter would show up with 2 to 3 times their expected quota in shingles and wood staves. This arrangement proved so lucrative that overseers who were well aware of the arrangement would look the other way, despite strict laws and increased policing to capture Maroons. Crew bosses would even hire Canal Maroons directly, either accepting fake free documents or choosing to ignore their legal status. Ultimately, both fringe and Canal Maroons found freedom on their own terms, while staying connected to society. One married couple, Venus and Jack, who worked on the canal, would later become Maroons after 3 attempts to flee. They were determined to stay together and use their knowledge of the swamp to finally escape. Even with these daring acts of self-emancipation, there were still others who aimed to break slavery altogether and overthrow the whole system. Since the beginning of American slavery, enslaved people have staged more than 250 slave rebellions. The Great Dismal Swamp empowered several wide-scale rebellions, most famously the Easter Conspiracy of 1802. Set for June 10th, the plan was to kill as many white slave owners as needed to secure their freedom and, quote, rest assured that our tyrants shall soon be taught lessons by our resentment that humility has never taught them, unquote. By May, the plans had spread too widely, and many conspirators were discovered. Dozens of people were captured and dozens more were killed or deported from the country. Tom Copper, an infamous general of the conspiracy and a Maroon, was arrested in Elizabeth City. In an incredible act of loyalty, 6 black men arrived on horseback and broke copper out of jail. 4 of the men were captured, but 2 men escaped, including Copper, who never appeared in the record again. Maroons who dared to rebel acted not just for themselves, but for all enslaved people still trapped in bondage. Those who survived likely retreated back to the swamp, where they may have remained until the Civil War. Archaeological records show remains of Maroon communities in the swamp up to roughly 1865, suggesting that most Maroons left the swamp when the war ended. Maroons rejoined society, including an elder Maroon at least 80 years old, according to one report, quote, whose locks were as white as the driven snow, unquote. He said, now that I have lived to see the freedom of my race and to know that I am a free man, I am ready to quit this world and go up yonder. Maroons have existed everywhere racial chattel slavery has existed in the world, and are especially known in places like Jamaica, Suriname, Brazil, and Haiti. For the Great Dismal Swamp Maroons, experts have only recently uncovered more of their history, partly because of the Maroons' own secrecy, and partly due to the challenges of examining a historical record, often written by the ruling class. Above all, Maroons wanted to be free. Most Maroons were ordinary people who were creative, hardworking, and tenacious in creating a better life for themselves and their children. Their legacy can be felt throughout the history of Black resistance, from the Underground Railroad to the Civil Rights era and Black Power era to the Black Lives Matter movement. In any time and place, wherever you find shackles of injustice, there are people creating their own keys. Before you go, I need to talk about PBS. Congress recently eliminated funding to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funds public television and radio stations across the United States. Many of these stations are PBS members, and while PBS itself is not entirely dependent on federal funds, these cuts will significantly impact the system. Local stations need direct support now more than ever, especially smaller stations who are facing the very real threat of closure. If you want to support PBS's mission, follow the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to donate to your local station. Any amount goes a long way. Thank you.
All right, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please check out the other content that we have on this channel. But before you go, I wanted to remind you again not to forget to check out the Black Primacy app. It is the best way to connect with Black-owned businesses near you. They need your support. We need your support. Link in the description.